A man steps off a plane in Tokyo with a passport from a country no map has ever recognized. A radar screen catches something moving too fast, then gone, as if the sky itself blinked. In an old photograph from 1941, one face in the crowd seems to belong to another decade entirely. These are not the kinds of mysteries that arrive with thunder. They appear quietly, in airport rooms, school corridors, military files, and fading paper archives. They live in the uneasy space between evidence and interpretation, where a detail survives but the explanation does not. If reality were a vast machine, we might expect it to run smoothly. Days follow nights. People remain where they are seen. The past stays behind us. But across history, there are stories that seem to interrupt that order for just a moment. Some may be mistakes. Some may be legends reshaped by time. Some may reveal more about memory than the universe. Still, they remain difficult to dismiss entirely, because each one carries some fragment that feels stubbornly physical. A witness, a photograph, a report, a recording, a name. Tonight, we are not searching for easy answers. We are following 10 strange disturbances in the record, asking not only what happened, but why the possibility still unsettles us. It began, according to the enduring account, at Haneda Airport in 1954, with paperwork that should have made the world simpler, not stranger. A traveler arrived in Japan carrying money from several countries, speaking multiple languages, and presenting a passport from a place called Taured. The problem was not merely that customs officers had never heard of Taured. The problem was that the man reportedly insisted his country was real, old, and located between France and Spain, where the nation of Andorra sits on any ordinary map. He was not confused, at least not in the way officials expected. He pointed with confidence. He behaved like someone whose world had always included what ours did not. The passport, the story says, contained stamps from previous international trips. His business documents appeared normal. Nothing about him suggested theatrical performance or panic. That may be why the case has remained so persistent in retellings. It was not a ghost story. It was bureaucracy meeting a contradiction it could not file. When authorities placed him under guard in a hotel room, the mystery deepened. By morning, the man was gone. No trace, no explanation, no graceful exit from a high floor that should have made escape impossible. Whether the account is distorted, embellished, or built on a lost misunderstanding, the emotional force remains. A border checkpoint is where identity becomes official. Yet here, identity seemed to point toward a country reality had never approved. The Taured story endures because it touches one of the oldest fears of modern life, that the systems we trust to define reality may only be describing one version of it. A passport is a small object, but it carries the authority of nations, histories, maps, and treaties. It says, this person belongs somewhere. When that belonging becomes impossible, the mind searches for explanations. Fraud is one. Misidentification is another. There may have been a real traveler from a real place, misremembered through decades of retelling. The evidence available today is incomplete, and responsible investigation requires that we say so. Still, legends survive for a reason. They often preserve a feeling, even when they fail to preserve a clean record. In the man from Taured, that feeling is displacement. The terror is not that a stranger appeared from nowhere. It is that he seemed to arrive from a world adjacent to ours, close enough to share airports and visas, but not close enough to share geography. And then there is the disappearance. Without it, the story might remain an administrative oddity. With it, it becomes something colder and more cinematic, a locked room mystery suspended above Tokyo. This is the first pattern, a normal setting, a concrete object, a contradiction, then absence. But sometimes the disturbance does not involve one man at a border. Sometimes it involves an entire aircraft falling out of time. The story of Santiago Flight 513 has the shape of a nightmare told in the language of aviation. A passenger plane supposedly took off in 1954, vanished, and then landed in Brazil in 1989, 35 years later. Inside, according to the tale, were not survivors but skeletons seated where passengers should have been. It is a powerful image because airplanes are promises of order. They are flight plans, fuel calculations, radio calls, and arrival boards. When a plane disappears, the modern world feels wounded. When it returns decades later, carrying silence instead of explanation, the wound becomes myth. The available record around Flight 513 is troubling in a different way. It does not behave like verified aviation history. The story is often linked to sensational newspaper accounts, and details shift depending on the telling. Names, airlines, and documentation resist firm confirmation. That does not make it meaningless, but it changes what kind of mystery it is. Here, the possible glitch may not be in space-time. It may be in storytelling itself. A rumor becomes a clipping. A clipping becomes evidence. Evidence becomes memory. Over time, the image of a ghost plane landing on a runway can feel more solid than the archives behind it. Yet even doubtful stories reveal something real. They show how deeply humans fear vanishing without closure. They ask what would happen if time returned what it had taken, but returned it too late. And that question prepares us for a stranger kind of return, not from the sky, but from the human body itself. In 1845, at a school known as Pensionat von Neuwelke, a teacher named Emilie Sage became linked to one of the most famous doppelganger accounts in European folklore. The story describes a woman seen in two places at once, not by one frightened witness, but reportedly by groups of students. The image is quiet and unnerving. A teacher writes at the blackboard. Behind her or beside her, another version appears. Similar posture, similar face, a double without obvious intention. In some retellings, the apparition mirrors her movements. In others, it appears pale, silent, and separate, as though the person had been copied imperfectly into the room. What makes the account linger is not violence or spectacle. It is the atmosphere of ordinary discipline disturbed. A classroom is supposed to train attention, to teach the young how the world works. Here, the lessons seem to fracture. Of course, the historical record depends heavily on testimony repeated through later sources. We cannot cross-examine the students. We cannot step back into that room and measure light, fatigue, suggestion, or fear. Human perception is fragile, especially in groups, where one person's alarm can become another person's memory. But the doppelganger remains a uniquely human mystery because it threatens the boundary of the self. If one body can appear twice, what exactly is a person? A location? A consciousness? A pattern? The question may seem philosophical until the next case, where memory itself appears to cross from one life into another. The Pollock twins were born into a family already shaped by grief. Before their birth, two older sisters had died in a tragic accident in England. Then came the twins, Jennifer and Gillian, and with them a set of details that their father, John Pollock, believed could not be easily explained. Stories surrounding the girls describe recognitions of places they had supposedly never visited, references to toys belonging to their deceased sisters, and unusual marks on the body that family members associated with injuries from the earlier tragedy. The case drew the attention of Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist known for studying children who reported memories of previous lives. For some, the Pollock twins became evidence of reincarnation. For others, the case reflected family grief, suggestion, coincidence, and the powerful ways children absorb emotional atmosphere. The truth is difficult to separate from the household in which it emerged. A grieving parent may notice patterns that another observer would miss. But children, too, sometimes say things that stop adults mid-breath. This is where the story turns. The earlier cases asked whether people or objects could slip through reality. The Pollock twins ask whether memory itself might behave strangely, whether identity could leave fingerprints in another mind. Even if the answer is psychological rather than supernatural, the mystery remains profound. Grief searches for continuity. Science searches for mechanism. Between them stands a child pointing to something she should not remember, and the room grows very still. Military radar does not dream, at least not in the human sense. It scans, records, calculates. That is why modern UAP footage carries a different emotional weight from older tales. The witness is not only a person looking up at the sky. The witness is a machine. In several widely discussed military videos, unidentified aerial phenomena appear as shapes or heat signatures, moving in ways that pilots and analysts have described as difficult to reconcile with known aircraft. They accelerate, rotate, vanish, or seem to cross distances with unsettling ease. The official language is careful. Unidentified does not mean otherworldly. It means the available data has not produced a confident explanation. Still, these images matter because they move the mystery from folklore into instrumentation. A radar return is not a medieval rumor. A cockpit recording is not a campfire tale. Yet even instruments are not perfect. Sensors can misread. Context can be missing. Optical effects, classified technology, atmospheric conditions, and human interpretation can all complicate what appears on screen. The tension is not between believers and skeptics. It is between the limits of evidence and the hunger for meaning. When something appears in military data and then disappears without a satisfying explanation, the mind reaches for metaphors, a skipped frame, a rendering error, a line of code briefly exposed. For the first time in our journey, the possible glitch is not hidden in an old archive. It is moving across modern screens, watched by trained observers, asking whether our tools have made the unknown smaller or simply sharper. At the midpoint of these mysteries, a different possibility appears. Maybe reality is not glitching at all. Maybe the glitch is in the fragile machinery we use to know it. Consider the viral clips of people and birds supposedly frozen in place on busy streets, including reports associated with Oxford Street and other urban settings. In the videos, a crowd seems briefly paused. A bird hangs strangely in the air. Traffic and noise continue around a pocket of impossible stillness. Online, the interpretation arrives almost instantly. Time stopped. But cameras are not neutral windows. Frame rates, compression, rolling shutters, staged performance, editing, perspective, and the strange timing of ordinary life can produce images that feel unreal. A person standing still for 3 seconds becomes evidence when surrounded by motion. A bird caught in wind may appear suspended. A video removed from context becomes an artifact without a witness. This does not make the experience foolish. It makes it modern. Today, many mysteries begin not in a court record or a diary, but in a clip shared millions of times before anyone knows where it came from. The evidence travels faster than the explanation. The revelation is uncomfortable. The more we record, the more reality seems to misbehave. Not because the world has become stranger necessarily, but because we now capture every awkward pause, every optical accident, every coincidence with cinematic precision. And once we learn to see glitches in video, we begin to search for them in photographs, where the past can no longer defend itself. In a photograph from 1941, taken at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia, a man stands among the crowd looking oddly out of place. He wears what appears to be a printed shirt, dark sunglasses, and holds a small camera. The image became known online as the time-traveling hipster. The appeal is immediate. The people around him seem anchored in wartime North America. Hats, suits, practical coats, faces arranged in the formal gravity of the period. Then there is this one figure, relaxed and modern-looking, as if he wandered into the frame from another century. Careful examination softens the mystery without erasing its charm. Sunglasses existed. Graphic shirts existed. Portable cameras existed. What feels impossible may be a collision between our stereotypes of the 1940s and the actual variety of clothing people wore. The past, in other words, was not as visually uniform as memory makes it. Still, the photograph remains useful because it exposes a deeper habit. We imagine history in costumes. We expect each decade to obey its assigned palette and silhouette. When someone breaks that expectation, the mind reaches for time travel before it considers ordinary individuality. The man in the crowd may not be a traveler. He may be something more human, a reminder that every era contains people who look slightly ahead of their time. But photographs do not only preserve facts, they preserve ambiguity. And sometimes ambiguity makes the past feel alive enough to look back at us. The sky trumpet recordings arrived like weather from nowhere. Low metallic groans, distant horn-like tones, strange vibrations heard over neighborhoods in Canada, Russia, the United States, and elsewhere. Some people described them as industrial. Others heard something almost biblical. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Audio mysteries are especially powerful because sound enters the body before it becomes an idea. A photograph can be studied at a distance. A strange noise in the sky feels intimate. It turns ordinary streets into listening chambers and makes the atmosphere seem mechanical, as if some vast hidden engine has started beneath the clouds. There are possible explanations. Industrial noise can travel in unexpected ways. Construction, trains, aircraft, weather systems, and even edited or misattributed recordings can create confusion. Infrasound and atmospheric acoustics can make distant sources feel close. Some viral sky trumpet videos may have influenced later recordings, giving people a template for what mystery should sound like. Yet the emotional residue remains. People looked up. They stopped what they were doing. For a few seconds, the familiar sky became uncertain. That moment matters because many so-called glitches begin with interruption. A person pauses on a sidewalk. A pilot turns toward an instrument. A family hears a child speak of another life. The ordinary world continues, but attention has shifted. Soon the disturbance moves from the sky into memory itself, where millions of people can share the same conviction and still collide with the physical record. The Mandela Effect begins with a simple discomfort, remembering something clearly that the world insists was never true. A logo spelled differently, a movie line altered in memory, a children's book title that seems to have changed by a single letter. Individually, these are small things. Collectively, they feel like a crowd standing before a locked door, each person certain they once had the key. Some examples are tied to brands, labels, toys, and packaging from the 1980s and 1990s. People search old boxes, thrift store shelves, VHS tapes, and advertisements, hoping to find physical proof that memory did not betray them. Sometimes they discover lookalikes, parodies, regional variations, or printed errors. Sometimes they find nothing but the stubborn force of recognition. Psychology offers strong explanations. Memory is reconstructive, not archival. We rebuild the past each time we recall it, borrowing from patterns, expectations, social influence, and emotional familiarity. When many people share the same cultural inputs, they may also share the same mistakes. But the Mandela Effect remains fascinating because it turns private uncertainty into collective experience. It asks what evidence means when the mind and the object disagree. If 1 million people remember a thing one way and the object says otherwise, where does truth live? This is not only a mystery about logos. It is a mystery about trust, in memory, in artifacts, in one another. And the final historical case pushes that trust to an even stranger edge, where witnesses claimed a man vanished in plain sight. In 1873, according to the story, a man named James Worson accepted a challenge to run from Leamington to Coventry in England. 2 friends followed by carriage, watching him move along the road. Then, without warning, Worson stumbled, cried out, and vanished before reaching the ground. The image is startling because it contains no elaborate machinery, no ancient curse, no storm-lit castle. Just a road, a runner, 2 companions, and an absence where a body should have landed. His friends reportedly searched the area and found nothing. No ditch, no hidden pit, no trail leading away. Only the memory of a man interrupted mid-fall. As with several older accounts, the evidentiary ground is fragile. The story appears in later collections of strange events, and its original documentation is difficult to establish with certainty. That matters. A mature reading must leave room for fabrication, misquotation, or folklore absorbed into local history. Still, the scene endures because it compresses every glitch narrative into a single gesture. A person is present. Then he is not. No explanation, no transition, no body to resolve the event into accident or crime. Disappearance stories haunt us because they violate the most basic expectation of matter. Things may die, decay, burn, sink, or be buried, but they are supposed to go somewhere. James Worson's legend asks what happens when a story refuses to provide that somewhere. By now, the pattern has become visible. Whether in archives, images, recordings, or testimony, these mysteries are not only about events. They are about the limits of closure. What makes these cases persist is not that they defeat science. In many instances, science, history, psychology, or careful skepticism offers the most responsible path forward. The Taured traveler may be a distorted identity case. Flight 513 may be a newspaper myth. The frozen street clips may be ordinary video artifacts. The time-traveling hipster may simply have been a stylish man in 1941. But explanation does not always erase meaning. A mirage is still real as an experience. A memory can be false and still reveal something true about longing. A legend can be historically weak and culturally powerful. The human mind is not only a recorder of events, it is also a maker of patterns, a survivor of uncertainty, a candle held up against the dark. These mysteries gather around thresholds, airports, classrooms, runways, roads, skies, photographs, childhood memories, places where one state should become another, departure to arrival, lesson to understanding, past to present, life to death, witness to record. When the transition fails, we call it a glitch. Maybe that word says more about our century than about the universe. Earlier generations spoke of omens, spirits, miracles, and curses. We speak of simulations, code, pauses, rendering errors. The metaphor has changed because our machines have changed. Yet beneath the metaphor is the same old human question. Is the world complete, or are we only seeing the portion our minds can hold? The answer remains unfinished, and that unfinishedness may be why we keep looking. Return to the airport room in Tokyo. Return to the radar screen, the old bridge photograph, the strange sound above a quiet neighborhood, the child speaking with a memory that does not seem to belong to her. None of these fragments gives us permission to abandon reason. But neither do they ask us to stop wondering. The most honest position is not certainty. It is attention. Some stories collapse under investigation. Some survive only as folklore. Some remain suspended, not because they prove a hidden structure behind reality, but because the record is incomplete and human experience is more complicated than a clean answer allows. If reality has glitches, they may not look like lightning cracks in the sky. They may look like paperwork that does not match a map, a photograph that unsettles our sense of time, or a memory shared by strangers who have never met. They may also be errors of perception, carried forward because they touch something we already fear or hope. The value of these mysteries is not that they give us a new doctrine. It is that they humble us. They remind us that truth often arrives through fragile evidence, fallible witnesses, and questions that outlive the people who first asked them. Maybe the universe is stranger than we know. Maybe the human mind is. Most likely, both are true in ways we have only begun to understand. And so the world continues, ordinary, luminous, unfinished, a machine, a miracle, a memory, or something in between.